Well, thank you so very much for your kind invitation to come and speak with you today. This is a book I'm certainly very excited about. I think it's a story that needs to be told. Let me introduce my family first. My beautiful wife, Mary, and she's holding my first granddaughter, Ilara. So what a joy she is to us. My son, Chance Beyer, next there. And then Mary's sister, Donna. So Mary and Donna were both Diane's sisters and so forth. And then Donna's husband, Larry Lewis, and things. So got a lot of stories I could tell. You know, when you spend so many years with a family like the O'Dells, you have to decide which stories do you want to share. But first, I think I want to read something to you in a prelude to the book that came from the chairman of the Polio Plus Committee, Mike McGovern. So if you would just give me a minute, because this is to you. This is what you've done. Dianne O'Dell is an inspiration and reminder of why Rotary, a volunteer member organization, embraced eradicating polio, a disease that affected 350,000 children a year in over 125 countries. Rotary conducted its first polio immunization campaign in 1979 in the Philippines, and it expanded that effort to 5 more countries, ultimately leading to the launch of the Polio Plus program in 1985. By 1988, Rotary had raised $247 million and mobilized its entire membership to support polio eradication. The fundraising campaign success in Legion involved people that catalyzed with the World Health Assembly to adopt a global resolution to eradicate polio in 1988. Rotary, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention joined hands to launch the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, and this global partnership has lasted 35 years and since been joined by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Gavi, and the Vaccine Alliance. Since then, Rotary has invested $2.6 billion in polio eradication efforts, and wild polio virus cases have reduced by 99.9%. Only 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, as of September of 2023, have had cases of polio, which remain endemic for the wild polio virus. The road to eradication has been challenging, and like Dianne, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative has had to overcome obstacles and challenges. However, slowly but surely major milestones have been reached. 5 of the 6 World Health Organization regions have been certified wild polio virus free to eradicate 2 of the 3 types of wild polio. With the same spirit as Dianne, Rotary and the GPEI partners will reach our goal and ensure that no child ever again is paralyzed by polio. Rotary and our partners honor polio survivors like Dianne and their life stories of persistence in the face of trials and tribulations, provide motivation to keep moving forward toward a polio-free world. And then on the back cover, John Germ, who was president of Rotary International in 2016-2017, writes, "Polio is a vicious, evil virus that attacks the most vulnerable children. Since 1979, polio has been the champion of polio eradication. We made a promise to the children of the world to eradicate polio, and Rotarians keep their promises. We and our partners have made great progress, but until the world is certified polio-free, we must all work to protect the innocent children from this disease that has ravaged so many lives throughout our world." Words can't express the difference that you've made. It really can. In 1980, there were 125 countries that had polio that was present. If I were Stephen King and writing a horror story, polio would be a pretty good disease to think about. When we say it affects the most vulnerable, generally it attacks children 5 years and younger. They're the ones at greatest risk of this disease. Probably can't read these, but maybe we can kind of follow along with a few of them anyway as we go along. Polio is a disease that was first seen in ancient Egypt. We have hieroglyphics that show pictures of individuals with withered limbs. In the Bible, we see stories of individuals who were crippled from this disease that was there. We find, those of you who maybe grew up in the 50s and 60s will remember going to school with school children that were in braces, oftentimes as a part of that was there. So this is a disease that has been horrendous and taken such a toll, but Because if you imagine if you have a child, 3, 5 years of age, and disease hits them, much like Dianne, July 12th, 1950, she came to her mother and father's bedside, and she said, "Mommy, my legs hurt," and she had a fever. And immediately, Miss O'Dell knew she had polio. The years in the 1950s was sometimes called the Summer of Fear. In one particular hospital there, Boston Children's Hospital, they had 40 children a day who were brought into that hospital who had contracted polio. They literally were triaging them on the sidewalks as they came in. There was no cure. There was nothing that they could do at that time. The vaccine had not yet been released to the public and so forth. So what we saw was thousands of children who were suffering that's there. If we go back to the turn of the century, World War I took place 1914 to 1918, and a man by the name of Philip Drinkler in 1930 developed a machine called a negative pressure ventilator, and we call it an iron lung. It was there. He did it to help individuals who had been victim of poisonous gas that was there. And one day, after he developed this machine, a person came and knocked on his door and said, "Will you come and see the blue children?" Blue children. Well, he went with him, and here was a whole wing of a hospital that had children whose facial color was blue because they could not get enough oxygen. They were suffocating. There was no cure for this, none at all. When Dianne contracted this disease, next morning they went to the children's clinic, and there they saw Dr. Walton Harrison. Many of you will remember him. Wonderful man. Oh my goodness. What a great pediatrician he was. But the next day, July 13th, they were sent to Memphis, and Dianne stayed in the polio wards of Memphis for 16 months. I think I've got a picture here. This was commonplace throughout the 40s and the 50s as the epidemic spread that was there. And spending that time, she was separated from her mom and dad. They would not allow her to touch her. Now, the truth is the virus, which is contracted, comes into first the digestive system, into the intestines and so forth, but there's not much evidence that it was passed by respiratory means. So generally people were safe to be around people who had this. But they were contagious for, we think, up to around 45 days that they were passing the virus that was there. But they were not allowed to be with their daughter and to touch her. As I was researching the book, I made note of something. There was a time, every night when Dianne got ready for bed, a handkerchief was placed over her face. And, I thought, well, maybe that's just because, lights come on in the middle of the night, take care of her, maybe it's for that. But as I was studying and researching the book, I found that the nurses in Memphis, they had determined that when night came, that's when most of the children died. So they laid a handkerchief over each child's face so they wouldn't see the person next to them as they passed away and things. To not be able to breathe, to not be able to move. Polio affects the motor neurons in the brain. As it comes through the digestive system, it goes into the intestines, it goes to what's called the blood-brain barrier, passes on through the spinal cord, and affects the motor neurons. So she had complete feeling and was in constant pain, but she could not move. So this machine that Philip Drinkler built, called an iron lung, it was a novel idea. It was to basically create negative pressure in the lung. It had a diaphragm on the back of it. Let's back up to the previous slide there. And this diaphragm had an electric motor, and as it turned in the back, the diaphragms would expand. Dianne was sealed inside the lung with a very tight collar around her neck, and negative pressure would occur, and the body would expand. The diaphragm would expand and allowed her to breathe normally. That's there. Very reliable machines that were there. You could set the breaths from actually from 12 to 45 breaths per minute. You could change the rhythm of that, but it required electricity. And that was, there was always a fear of that. By the way, after 16 months, Miss O'Dell and Mr. O'Dell decided to bring her home against the wishes of the people, and people said, you can't care for her, there's no way. You know, put her in a home, you know, she's not going to live. But that's not how they were raised. I think if anything described the O'Dells, it was do the right thing. This is our daughter, we're taking her home. We're going to learn everything we can about this, and we're going to do the best we can to care for her. So that's what they did. So she comes home, and she could come out of the lung for short periods of time in childhood, but the attitude was, we don't have pity parties at the O'Dell home. You know, we do what we have to do each and every day. I asked Miss O'Dell before she passed, we're on page 23 in the book, I said, what were you feeling? What were you thinking about? You know, how are you dealing with this? I want you to read, this was her statement. After she told me this, I went and wrote it down almost verbatim. She said, Will, I was scared like I guess anyone would be. I didn't know what would lie ahead. We just lived day to day, prayed and did what we could. I never worried about paying the bills or how we would take care of Dianne. I just had faith that God would provide. We had friends and family that were also praying for us and offered help. And over the years, that never changed. All these years later, and people still help. There have been so many people who have blessed us. I will never understand why so many people worry. I guess they just don't trust the good Lord will really take care of them. I think you should do all that you can do and just turn the rest over to God. If people would only truly believe that God really does answer prayers and we as Christians are supposed to help each other, I never worried 1 minute about where our basic needs would come from. So many people helped the O'Dell family throughout this journey that was there. Rotary, Lions Club, churches all across West Tennessee. And there's an important lesson to be learned from that, and that is that we can get through almost anything if we know we're not alone. It's there. I worked for 29 years and 6 months as a crisis counselor with Jackson Madison County Schools. And what I learned in talking to thousands of those kids is they just needed one person to say they cared, one person to step up and do the right thing, to try to help them with so many different things. When I look at this group, this gentleman right here, Frank McMean, he was our real hero. He made a difference in the lives of Dianne. He brought so many people to her, introduced Libby Murphy, introduced, you know, people, the celebrities that came to town. And Dianne had this unique feature. I think, what is it about Dianne that made her so well known? I don't know if you know this, but on the day that she died, she was the #1 search topic on Google worldwide. Since this book has been written, I'm seeing it in Norway and Finland and France and Italy and all over the world. People are interested in reading this story. What was it about this family that was there? What was it that made the celebrities not come once, maybe out of sympathy or compassion or care or maybe just curiosity, but what made them come back? They came back because I think Dianne reminded us, you know, how do you leave the house and feel sorry for your life and what you did, what you're doing? If you can walk, if you can talk and reason and problem solve, and you have people that love you and care about you, some that you probably never even met, what do I have to feel sorry for? Once I asked Dianne, I said, Dianne, what do you think you missed the most? And she said, I can tell you immediately. I missed hugging my mom and dad. You know, I wish I had arms, and when I get to heaven, that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to reach up and put my arms around my mom and dad. Touch is so very important to all of us that's there. But she took what skills she had. That was her mind. Throughout her teenage years, she tutored most of the kids in the neighborhood. They would come to the house, and she was very well read, very well educated. Education was valued in the O'Dell home, I can tell you that for sure. Those World Book encyclopedias, that they were wore out, but very well read. I'll tell you about Miss O'Dell for a minute. The story's not just about Dianne, but it's also about Geneva and Freeman, Mary and Donna. Geneva was born in Luray, Tennessee. She had, I hope I have these numbers correct, but I looked at this yesterday. Her mother died in childbirth, and then her father remarried, and there were 15 living children in that household. I think there were 2 others that passed in childbirth. 15, but Geneva worked on a farm. She was proud of the fact that she grew up picking cotton and things. Hard working. I've never known anyone who had more stamina and energy than her. She would wear you out in terms of if you try to match her work ethic that was there. Geneva was a self-educated woman, again, very well read. I dare say there was ever a day that passed by that she didn't sit down and read her Bible at some time during the day. She was probably one of the most scholarly individuals of the Bible I think that I've probably ever known. That was true of all the members in the O'Dell household. But a few stories about Geneva. Her devotion to Dianne was constant. Dianne required 24-hour days, 7-day-a-week care. So we've had sick children. You know what that's like. And you know how even sometimes 3 or 4 days or a week, and how tiring it is, and how you want him to get better. She cared for her. The iron lung was confining. Any little air leak had to be fixed immediately, or you lost that negative pressure inside of that. So throughout the day, throughout the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, didn't matter. If there was a leak, it had to be fixed, and Miss O'Dell was the one that typically did that, was there. We fed her, we bathed her, we took care of her personal hygiene issues that were there. We had to move her constantly. You know, maybe it's a little sensitive, but in 58 years in an iron lung, she never had a bed sore, not one. That I still attest to the care that she received that was there. Others pitched in, Donna and Mary. They were there every afternoon, throughout the evening, oftentimes until late at night, and helping with Dianne. She had complete pain that was there. If you tried to move her, oftentimes her limbs would come out of the joints that was there. That was difficult. But Geneva was always steadfast, always there. There was one Thanksgiving that Geneva went to take a turkey out of the oven, and she slipped and fell backwards, and the hot grease of this poured out from her knees down and literally just melted that skin off her legs. I remember there, and she's sitting in the floor and she's weeping, and I said, Miss O'Dell, we'll take you to the hospital. We've got to go to the hospital. And she says, I'm not crying about this. Who will take care of Dianne? Who will take care of Dianne? She went to the hospital, and they said, you've got to be here a while. We've got to treat these burns. They're very serious, risk of infection, etc. She said, I'm sorry, I'm going home. I have my daughter to take care of. And she did. Miss O'Dell had 3 bouts of cancer, 3 bouts. Lost her hair, all the sickness that goes with that. She took care of Dianne throughout her life, all the way up to the time she was in a wheelchair. The only real relief we got was when Frank got involved and the foundation stepped in, and the fundraisers that took place, because oddly enough, we couldn't get home health care. We went all the way to the Vice President of the United States trying to get home health care and could not. Truthfully, the first home health care person that ever showed up came the day she died. That's when we had it. But Frank and Healthcare Foundation made all the difference in the world by giving some relief and allowing the family to rest in her care. Dianne was an optimist. She attracted people to her. Lots of friends. Oh my goodness, every weekend almost. She was always looking forward to that weekend, looking forward to that next event. We had weddings at the home. We had birthdays at the home. You know, the O'Dell home was a place that you came and you celebrated life. Life was a gift. It wasn't a problem to solve. It was truly a gift. And Miss O'Dell was absolutely correct when she said she never worried about those things. She didn't. She just did not. Freeman, one of the most humble men I've ever known. You know, never heard anyone ever say anything bad about Freeman. You know, he was just a good man that was there. He stepped up and did what needed to be done when it needed to be done. He was in charge of the Iron Lung. He took care of that, you know, relentlessly and made sure that it worked. Her life depended on it. He slept with the light on every night and trained himself if the lights went off, he woke up and was out in the garage starting those respirators and getting electricity to that lung that was there and things. Freeman was a veteran. He was in the 163rd Combat Engineers. It was D-Day +3 when he came ashore. As combat engineers, they built bridges. As the Germans would retreat, they built bridges all across France and into Germany. He helped build the first bridge over the Rhine and over the Seine. I took him one time to Paris Landing, and as soon as he walked in the room, oh my goodness, about 20 men there. They all came up to him, and they truly were brothers. They had some stories to tell. A lot of World War II veterans never talked about the war. He didn't either. But when they got together, they shared stories that, oh my goodness. Just briefly, when the Germans would blow up a bridge and they would retreat, somebody had to go back out there and build it, but the Germans put snipers on the other side of the river. So they told the story, and I heard story after story after story. Remember Private so-and-so? Remember this man? Remember this man? They went out on the bridges, they're working, a shot was fired, they were gone. They retreated back off the bridge, they shelled the other side of the river, and then they had to go back out there again. And maybe you got the snipers, maybe you didn't. Several men there in that, I remember, said, Freeman, if it wasn't for y'all ordering me to keep me ashore, I probably wouldn't be here, you know, because some of the men found out they had children and so forth, and they wouldn't let them come out and work on the bridges. He was a remarkable man. We need a Christmas story. We're almost in Christmas. One time, Freeman said to me, Will, he said, let's go over and see a friend of mine, Lester Coleman. He lived out in Beach Bluff. He had nurseries there and raised plants, and particularly poinsettias during the Christmas time of year. So I went over there with him, and he still had half of a whole, you know, greenhouse there that had poinsettias. He went to get some poinsettias for the family, Freeman did, and he said, Lester, what do you do with all these? You know, and he says, well, to be honest, after tomorrow, after Christmas, you know, by noon, he says, we're kind of done with them. We're not going to sell them after Christmas. So he stopped and he said, can I have them? And he said, well, Freeman, what do you want with, you know, 1,000 poinsettias? He said, I just want to give them away. So he said, can I borrow your truck? He said, sure. So that next morning after Christmas, you know, we got up and went over there and we loaded up poinsettias for a couple of hours, and we went out all over Jackson, Tennessee, went to all the nursing homes, hospitals, everywhere we could go until late that night, and we gave away poinsettias. And I asked Freeman, I said, what do we tell them? Because people would say, who's this from? And say, just from someone who's thinking about you and loves you. He said, hey, I know that's not true, that's a lie. But he said, but it'll be okay. Tell them that. And we did. And that kind of became a tradition also, but it defines who Freeman was. He was a person that was always unselfish. You know, him and Geneva both worked together as a team, as did Donna and Mary as well. Donna and Mary gave up a lot growing up. They couldn't participate in the sports activities and cheerleading and all the other little kinds of things because they were needed at the home. And they never complained. They always did what they needed to do to help with those types of things that was there.